thank you for sticking with it. Let me get that out of the way. Let's see what other technical problems we can encounter during the course of this. Anyway, if you have any other questions or comments, you've been putting the comments in the exact right place. If you have questions, put them in the Q&A section. If you have a problem, as I just demonstrated, I'll solve it, and you can check out my hook while the DJ revolves it. Let's go. Now, let me say that I do take it as a great honor and responsibility to be the final presenter today in this parade of talented people. I admire everybody's stamina for staying through this, through the 12th hour, and thanks for sticking around for Truth, Beauty, Data, and You. So, what I want to talk about today is something that is essential in my mind for all of you to know, and that is that you, all of you, every single person watching and listening to this talk is an artist. You are an artist. If you work in data, congratulations, you are an artist. If you do analysis of any kind, guess what? You are also an artist. And if you write code, surprise, you are an artist too. But it's bigger than that. You might think, no, I'm no artist. I can't do that kind of thing. Well, let me tell you, not only can you do it, but you can't not do it. So let's get into it. Artists, historically and currently and eternally, are the people whose job it is to speak the truth. Artists speak the truth in absolutes. They speak the truth in metaphors. They speak the truth directly with illusion. They speak to the greater truths in the world, the smaller truths, and all the truths in between. And everything that you do with data and with analysis and with code is all in service of this speaking the honest, irrefutable truth to the best of your ability to as many people as possible. You, the artist in question, create in the medium of code. You're a multimedia artist. You start with data, that's one medium, your essential medium, and then you add others to it, whether it's electrons or oils or animation or code or ink or paper or light. It does not matter. We start with data as our first medium. We add at least one other medium to it. Well, which one to use? It doesn't matter. That's your choice. And there's no wrong answer, because all media provides us a window back into our world. So we, the artists, provide people with multiple ways of re-entering our world through different windows. And when you can do that for people, it allows them to triangulate the world that they live in and see its shape. I did not come up with that, by the way. Scott McCloud did in a TED Talk called The Visual Magic of Comics back in 2009. But maybe that reference is a little bit too recent for you. Let's go back another 190 years. Let's go back to 1819, when a 24-year-old poet named John Keats dropped a straight-fire club banger on the world called Ode on a Grecian Urn. Everybody knows the chorus to this jam. Beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That's all you know on earth and all you need to know. But what does this actually mean? Well, the quick and dirty version is Keats starts off by talking about three figures painted on an urn, and he's disappointed that he doesn't know the details about who they are, like their names or specifically what they're doing. But then in the next stanza, he kind of switches it up and says, well, wait, maybe the point of art isn't to report the news about whether a specific guy got into a specific battle on Wednesday the 7th in Thermopylae, Sherford. Maybe the point of art is to describe things that are universal and describe things that are universally understood. So this famous quote is actually a little misleading, or at least it's often misunderstood, because it's not that things are true just because they're beautiful. It's really a poem that's more about synecdoche. What's that now? It's synecdoche. Well, what is that? It's a subclass of metonymy, of course. You're all up to speed on your rhetorical tropes, right? Well, okay, more specifically, it's the concept where a part of something can be assumed to represent the whole, like when we say wheels to refer to a car. Weirdly, it can also mean the exact opposite thing, like when the whole is used to refer to the part, like when we say Liverpool to refer to the football club rather than the entire city. So synecdoche explains how you, an artist, can reveal greater truths to the world by accurately presenting one small truth that stands in for the whole. You create a design on one topic with one data set, and in doing so, you create this one part of the truth that opens up a window, one specific window through which people can triangulate the world they live in and see its shape. And I guess I've slipped back to the modern era, but that's just as well, because it's the modern era in which we live, and it's the modern era in which it falls to us to use data and all the other means at our disposal to carry on this artist's burden of providing truth in synecdoche. Facts and objectivity are not having their best years. They're under attack from conspiracy theorists and cherry-picking whataboutists. They're derided by the proudly ignorant. They're undermined by aspiring autocrats and the quislings of the same. Facts are bowed, but it is art that can keep them unbroken. Because artists, as Leopold I reminds us, are acquainted with all members of society, and for that reason are very dangerous. So let's talk about what artists can do that might be dangerous in the mind of a monarch or an aspiring autocrat. Artists can bring complicated issues to the attention of a much wider audience. As Kenton Powell from Vice said on the PolicyViz podcast recently, stories without visuals don't get shown on television. Our society is increasingly Instagram over the Guardian. People are reluctant to read and synthesize and ponder. If you can make a complex story visual, it ends up being shown across more media and it reaches more people. Now, even if people disagree with your angle, that's okay, because if they never hear the story in the first place, they can't even consider that there was ever a story to think about. Artists can also give hope to the hopeless. Here's what activist D. Ray McKesson has to say about the positive effects of creativity. If we can't imagine it, we can't fight for it. He says this as part of a longer quotation about how the work of activists often focuses on bringing about the absence of oppression. And for many people who've suffered oppression, they aren't even capable of imagining a positive world with justice and joy. Artists like you and me are the ones with the imagination to conceive of this world and to paint a picture of this world that's worth hoping for and is worth dreaming about. I don't want to do political work, you say, as you refuse the call on your hero's journey. You're all familiar with The Hero's Journey, right? The Joseph Campbell book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. In case you are not familiar with it, he's talking about the archetypal hero in world mythologies. And there's this common progression of stages that a hero passes through. In this scenario, you're the hero. You've been living in the ordinary world. Oops. Anyway, you've been living in the ordinary world. And now you're hearing your call to adventure, but you're refusing the call. And I hope that by the end of this talk, you'll feel that you've met the mentor, and maybe you'll be ready to cross the threshold into the special world. So, sorry about that. The idea of political work can seem exhausting and daunting. But, you know, the way that you design and the way that you choose to emphasize things or de-emphasize things in your analyses, whatever you filter in or out, all the algorithms you write, they're all political decisions. Even our ideas about dataviz best practices are colored by how we ran the studies that told us about those best practices. And they're colored by how we collected our data and how we make assumptions about cultural norms. And that's what Kennedy Elliott was talking about at OpenViz conference a couple years ago, when she went through all the studies on human perception that she could find. She discussed how they were conducted and where they might be culturally biased. And if most of the study data comes from the assessments of Americans, primarily younger adults, primarily attending colleges, how can you extrapolate those results to the entire population of the world? So Heather Krause from DataSyst works on similar topics, and she shows this example of a case where these two charts about how women spent their time were shown to people in Bangladesh. And interestingly, they could not understand the chart on the left nearly as well as the chart on the right, because culturally their understanding of time is cyclical and not linear. Because our choices in design and in coding and in analysis will have cascading effects throughout time, and they can never be truly value neutral, these are the kinds of considerations that we have to keep in mind. And so I say this to the people who don't want to do political work. If you work in software or design, you also work in politics already. Let's come back around to art again. What can we really do as data visualizers to be considered artists? What are the things that an artist could do? You can bring joy, you can entertain, you can offer assurance, you can offer comfort. You could bring a sense of belonging or a sense of community. You can educate or bring awareness of an unreported issue. But most importantly, you can sneak a message in through the side window when a reluctant audience has already locked its front door. Now, there are examples of beautiful and meaningful data visualizations all around us. Some of them are direct. Now, the majority of people here are probably already aware of these ongoing initiatives like Chloe Tsang's Viz for Social Good or Olga Subik's Data for a Cause. Of course, you don't need a structured challenge or an exhibition to make something that educates or raises awareness directly. Ken Flerlich has produced several of them this year, including the ones that I'm shown here about the backlog in rape kits and in modern slavery. So too is Luke Stanky with his Race in America graphic, and Nailusa with Bread and Salt, which is a remarkably poignant story about in Aleppo in Syria, bakeries, which themselves are an example of synecdoche because bread equals life, are continuing to function despite widespread devastation. But you don't have to do your vizzes this way. You can be silly and whimsical if you want, and then you can sneak your message in through the side window, like Lila Manheim did with this viz, which is kind of silly and about frying eggs on the sidewalk, but sliding in the side window is the message that climate change really is a thing. Or Anya Ahern did with Consumed. This is a cartoony and accessible personal story about the things that she touched in a single day. But it slides through the side window a message about consumerism and gender issues. She's not the only one to use personal experience as synecdoche for our shared experience on Earth. R.J. Andrews did it too when he moved to Africa and he learned about all the animals in his new homeland. He was inspired to make Endangered Safari. On the surface, a pleasingly balanced and interesting poster about what's in his backyard. But really, it's a message about conservation. You can also reference other art with existing connotations to amplify your message, which is what Mariana Costadou did here with Banksy Would Complain. It highlights child poverty around the world with poignant simplicity. And these examples don't even touch on the work done by people outside of our specific community. People like generative protest artist Kristen Henry, or the astonishingly talented modeler and game designer Nikki Case, who I insist that you go to his website and experience all of his interactives for yourself. I have the parable of the polygons listed here, the evolution of trust, we become what we behold. They're just amazing and wonderful to experience. There's also these artists who can intermix traditional studio art with coding and journalism, like Mona Shalabi, Giorgia Lupi, Michela Lazzaroni, and countless others. Ultimately, it just doesn't matter what your tool or milieu of choice is. Remember, it's data plus whatever. You're a multimedia artist, and whatever works best for you is the tool you should use. Well, here you are refusing the call again, claiming not to be an artist. You know, this is self-defeatist, and it's grounded in things that we've been told throughout our lives, or things that our insecure brains wanted us to believe. Ask Philip Riggs, the creator of Data Noodles. He made a conscious decision years ago to work on his illustrations. This one turns out to be particularly appropriate for this particular presentation. With effort and practice, he has become an excellent cartoonist, in addition to being a wonderful dataviz talent. Being an artist isn't an innate thing. It's a skill, and it's one that you improve with practice. But what if I fail? What if I fail? Friend, I can talk all about failure in public. By far, my most popular visits are from 2016, and they're all embarrassingly incorrect US election predictions. Not this day, but another day, I will go into great detail about failing in public. Now, let me just assure you that failing in public is not fatal. In fact, it is very instructive and useful if you choose to let it be. But I don't want to do this in public. Okay, well, as far as I'm concerned, you have to. You have a voice and a platform and the ability. When you have a voice and a platform and the ability, it is your obligation and your responsibility to use those things on behalf of the people who don't have them. I've seen a lot of smart and talented people over the years denigrate their own abilities, and they say things like, but what I do is easy. No, it's easy for you. For other people, it seems like a superpower. I mean, don't get egotistical about it because that's a terrible look, but don't downplay the power that you have. Being able to analyze data and draw conclusions and convey insight are far from universal skills. Now, you live in a society increasingly unwilling or unable to listen to reason. Data portals are being shut down, studies are being terminated, oversight is being disbanded. Is now really the time for you to be silent? This is not a partisan argument. This is universal no matter what your politics are. It is a facts versus fictions argument. Let's wrap up by going back to Scott McCloud. Now, I know that if you're listening to this presentation, you most likely have the technical ability to create data visualizations. You have access to the tools you need, and you have the knowledge of what kinds of data sets might be out there. I also suspect that you have feelings about the world and about the value of preserving the truth. And if you have all that, what else does it take to be a public artist, to carry the banner of truth? I happen to think that it's just the same things that McCloud says you need in order to create comics. All you need is the desire to be heard, the will to learn, and the ability to see. Now, let's get started. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing what you all create.